Section 4. On a sense of proportion. Those of us who study the papers and the parliamentary speeches with proper attention must have, by this time, a fairly precise idea of the nature of the evil of socialism. It is a remote utopian dream, impossible of fulfillment, and also an overwhelming practical danger that threatens us at every moment. It is only a thing that is as distant as the end of the world, and as near as the end of the street.
All that is clear enough, but the aspect of it that arrests me at this moment is more especially the utopian aspect. A person who used to write in the Daily Mail paid some attention to this aspect,
and represented this social ideal, or indeed almost any other social ideal, as a sort of paradise of poltroons. He suggested that weaklings wish to be protected from the strain and stress of our vigorous individualism, and so cried out for this paternal government or grandmotherly legislation. And it was while I was reading his remarks, with a deep and never-failing enjoyment, that the image of the individualist rose before me, of the sort of men who probably write such remarks, and certainly reads them. The reader refolds the Daily Mail, and rises from his intensely individualistic breakfast table, where he has just dispatched his bold and adventurous breakfast. The bacon cut in rashers from the wild boar which but lately turned to bay in his back garden. The eggs perilously snatched from swaying nest and flapping bird at the top of those toppling trees which gave the house its appropriate name of Pinecrest. He puts on his curious and creative hat, built on some bold plan entirely made up out of his own curious and creative head. He walks outside his unique and unparalleled house, also built with his own well-won wealth, according to his own well-conceived architectural design, and seeming by its very outline against the sky to express his own passionate personality. He strides down the street, making his own way over hill and dale towards the place of his own chosen and favourite labour, the workshop of his imaginative craft. He lingers on the way, now to pluck a flower, now to compose a poem, for his time is his own. He is an individual and a free man, and not as these communists. He can work at his own craft when he will, and labour far into the night to make up for an idle morning. Such is the life of the clerk in a world of private enterprise and practical individualism, such the manner of his free passage from his home. He continues to stride lightly along until he sees afar off the picturesque and striking tower of that workshop in which he will, as with the creative strokes of a god, he sees it, I say, afar off. The expression is not wholly accidental, for that is exactly the defect in all that sort of journalistic philosophy of individualism and enterprise, that those things are, at present, even more remote and improbable than communal visions. It is not the dreadful Bolshevist republic that is afar off. It is not the socialistic state that is utopian. In that sense, it is not even utopia that is utopian. The socialist state may in one sense be very truly described as terribly and menacingly near. The socialist state is exceedingly like the capitalist state, in which the clerk reads and the journalist writes. Utopia is exactly like the present state of affairs, only worse. It would make no difference to the clerk if his job became a part of a government department tomorrow. He would be equally civilized and equally uncivic if the distant and shadowy person at the head of the department were a government official. Indeed, it does make very little difference to him now whether he or his sons and daughters are employed at the post office on bold and revolutionary socialistic principles, or employed at the stores on wild and adventurous individualist principles. I never heard of anything resembling civil war between the daughters at the stores and the daughter in the post office. I doubt whether the young lady at the post office is so imbued with Bolshevist principles that she would think it a part of the higher morality to expropriate something without payment off the counter of the stores. I doubt whether the young lady at the stores shudders when she passes a red pillar box, seeing in it an outpost of the Red Peril. What is really a long way off is this individuality and liberty the Daily Mail praised. It is the tower that a man has built for himself that is seen in the distance. It is private enterprise that is utopian, in the sense of something as distant as utopia. It is private property that is for us an ideal, and for our critics an impossibility. It is that which can be really discussed almost exactly as the writer in the Daily Mail discusses collectivism. It is that which some people consider a goal, and some people a mirage. It is that which its friends maintain to be the final satisfaction of modern hopes and hungers, and its enemies maintain to be a contradiction to common sense and common human possibilities.
All the controversialists who have become conscious of the real issue
are already saying of our ideal exactly what used to be said of the socialists' ideal. They are saying that private property is too ideal not to be impossible. They are saying that private enterprise is too good to be true. They are saying that the idea of ordinary men owning ordinary possessions is against the laws of political economy and requires an alteration in human nature. They are saying that all practical businessmen know that the thing would never work, exactly as the same obliging people are always prepared to know that state management would never work. For they hold the simple and touching faith that no management except their own could ever work. They call this the law of nature, and they call anybody who ventures to doubt it a weakling. But the point to see is that, although the normal solution of private property for all is even now not very widely realized, insofar as it is realized by the rulers of the modern market, and therefore of the modern world, it is to this normal notion of property that they apply the same criticism as they applied to the abnormal notion of communism. They say it is utopian, and they are right. They say it is idealistic, and they are right. They say it is quixotic, and they are right. It deserves every name that will indicate how completely they have driven justice out of the world, every name that will measure how remote from them and their sort is the standard of honourable living, every name that will emphasize and repeat the fact that property and liberty are sundered from them and theirs by an abyss between heaven and hell. That is the real issue to be fought out with our serious critics, and I have written here a series of articles dealing more directly with it. It is the question of whether this ideal can be anything but an ideal, not the question of whether it is to be confounded with the present contemptible reality. It is simply the question of whether this good thing is really too good to be true. For the present, I will merely say that if the pessimists are convinced of their pessimism, if the skeptics really hold that our social ideal is now banished forever by mechanical difficulties or materialistic fate, they have at least reached a remarkable and curious conclusion. It is hardly stranger to say that man will have henceforth to be separated from his arms and legs, owing to the improved pattern of wheels, than to say that he must forever say farewell to two supports so natural as the sense of choosing for himself and of owning something of his own. These critics, whether they figure as critics of socialism or distributism, are very fond of talking about extravagant stretches of the imagination or impossible strains upon human nature. I confess I have to stretch and strain my own human imagination and human nature very far to conceive anything so crooked and uncanny as the human race ending with a complete forgetfulness of the possessive pronoun. Nevertheless, as we say, it is with these critics we are in controversy. Distribution may be a dream. 3 acres and a cow may be a joke. Cows may be fabulous animals. Liberty may be a name. Private enterprise may be a wild goose chase on which the world can go no further. But as for the people who talk as if property and private enterprise were the principles now in operation, those people are so blind and deaf and dead to all the realities of their own daily existence that they can be dismissed from the debate. In this sense, therefore, we are indeed utopian, in the sense that our task is possibly more distant and certainly more difficult. We are more revolutionary in the sense that a revolution means a reversal of direction, even if it were accompanied with a restraint upon pace. The world we want is much more different from the existing world than the existing world is different from the world of socialism. Indeed, as has already been noted, there is not much difference between the present world and socialism, except that we have left out the less important and more ornamental notions of socialism, such additional fancies as justice, citizenship, the abolition of hunger, and so on.
We have already accepted anything that anybody of intelligence ever disliked in socialism.
We have everything that critics used to complain of in the desolate utility and unity of looking backward. Insofar as the world of Wells or Webb was criticized as a centralized, impersonal, and monotonous civilization, that is an exact description of existing civilization. Nothing has been left out but some idle fancies about feeding the poor or giving rights to the populace. In every other way, the unification and regimentation is already complete. Utopia has done its worst. Capitalism has done all that socialism threatened to do. The clerk has exactly the sort of passive functions and permissive pleasures that he would have in the most monstrous model village. I do not sneer at him. He has many intelligent tastes and domestic virtues in spite of the civilization he enjoys. They are exactly the tastes and virtues he could have as a tenant and a servant of the state. But from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to sleep again, his life is run in grooves made for him by other people, and often other people he will never even know. He lives in a house that he does not own, that he did not make, that he does not want. He moves everywhere in ruts. He always goes up to his work on rails.
He has forgotten what his fathers, the hunters and the pilgrims and the wandering minstrels, meant by finding their way to a place.
He thinks in terms of wages. That is, he has forgotten the real meaning of wealth. His highest ambition is concerned with getting this or that subordinate post in a business that is already a bureaucracy. There is a certain amount of competition for that post inside that business, but so there would be inside any bureaucracy. This is a point that the apologists of monopoly often miss. They sometimes plead that even in such a system there may still be a competition among servants, presumably a competition in servility. But so there might be after nationalization, when they were all government servants. The whole objection to state socialism vanishes if that is an answer to the objection. If every shop were as thoroughly nationalized as a police station, it would not prevent the pleasing virtues of jealousy, intrigue, and selfish ambition from blooming and blossoming among them, as they sometimes do even among policemen. Anyhow, that world exists, and to challenge that world may be called utopian. To change that world may be called insanely utopian. In that sense, the name may be applied to me and those who agree with me, and we shall not quarrel with it. But in another sense, the name is highly misleading, and particularly inappropriate. The word utopia implies not only difficulty of attainment, but also other qualities attached to it in such examples as the utopia of Mr. Wells. And it is essential to explain at once why they do not attach to our utopia, if it is a utopia. There is such a thing as what we should call ideal distributism, though we should not, in this vale of tears, expect distributism to be ideal.
In the same sense, there certainly is such a thing as ideal communism.
But there is no such thing as ideal capitalism, and there is no such thing as a capitalist ideal. As we have already noticed, though it has not been noticed often enough, whenever the capitalist does become an idealist,
and especially when he does become a sentimentalist,
he always talks like a socialist. He always talks about social service and our common interests in the whole community. From this it follows that insofar as such a man is likely to have such a thing as a utopia, it will be more or less in the style of a socialist utopia. The successful financier can put up with an imperfect world, whether or no he has the Christian humility to recognize himself as one of its imperfections. But if he is called upon to conceive a perfect world, it will be something in the way of the pattern state of the Fabians or the ILP. He will look for something systematized, something simplified, something all on the same plan, and he will not get it. At least, he will not get it from me. It is exactly from that simplification and sameness that I pray to be saved,
and should be proud if I could save anybody.
It is exactly from that order and unity that I call on the name of liberty to deliver us. We do not offer perfection. What we offer is proportion. We wish to correct the proportions of the modern state, but proportion is between varied things, and a proportion is hardly ever a pattern. It is as if we were drawing a picture of a living man, and they thought we were drawing a diagram of wheels and rods for the construction of a robot. We do not propose that in a healthy society all land should be held in the same way, or that all property should be owned on the same conditions, or that all citizens should have the same relation to the city. It is our whole point that the central power needs lesser powers to balance and check it, and that these must be of many kinds, some individual, some communal, some official, and so on. Some of them will probably abuse their privilege, but we prefer the risk to that of the state, or of the trust, which abuses its omnipotence. For instance, I am sometimes blamed for not believing in my own age, or blamed still more for believing in my own religion. I am called medieval, and some have even traced in me bias in favour of the Catholic Church, to which I belong. But suppose we were to take a parallel from these things. If anyone said that medieval kings or modern peasant countries were to blame for tolerating patches of avowed Bolshevism, we should be rather surprised if we found that the remark really referred to their tolerating monasteries. Yet it is quite true in one sense that monasteries are devoted to communism, and that monks are all communists. Their economic and ethical life is an exception to a general civilization of feudalism or family life, yet their privileged position was regarded as rather a prop of social order. They give to certain communal ideas their proper and proportionate place in the state, and something of the same thing was true of the common land. We should welcome the chance of allowing any guilds or groups of a communal colour their proper and proportionate place in the state. We should be perfectly willing to mark off some part of the land as common land. What we say is that merely nationalizing all the land is like merely making monks of all the people. It is giving those ideals more than their proper and proportionate place in the state. The ordinary meaning of communism is not that some people are communists, but that all people are communists. But we should not say, in the same hard and literal sense, that the meaning of distributism is that all people are distributists. We certainly should not say that the meaning of a peasant state is that all people are peasants. We should mean that it had the general character of a peasant state, that the land was largely held in that fashion, and the law generally directed in that spirit, that any other institution stood up as recognizable exceptions, as landmarks on that high tableland of equality. If this is inconsistent, nothing is consistent. If this is unpractical, all human life is unpractical. If a man wants what he calls a flower garden, he plants flowers where he can, and especially where they will determine the general character of the landscape gardening. But they do not completely cover the garden, they only positively colour it. He does not expect roses to grow in the chimney pots, or daisies to climb up the railings. Still less does he expect tulips to grow on the pine, or the monkey tree to blossom like a rhododendron. But he knows perfectly well what he means by a flower garden, and so does everybody else. If he does not want a flower garden, but a kitchen garden, he proceeds differently. But he does not expect a kitchen garden to be exactly like a kitchen. He does not dig out all the potatoes because it is not a flower garden and the potato has a flower. He knows the main thing he is trying to achieve, but, not being a born fool, he does not think he can achieve it everywhere in exactly the same degree, or in a manner equally unmixed with things of another sort. The flower gardener will not banish nasturtiums to the kitchen garden because some strange people have been known to eat them. Nor will the other class a vegetable as a flower because it is called a cauliflower. So, from our social garden, we should not necessarily exclude every modern machine any more than we should exclude every medieval monastery. And indeed, the epilogue is appropriate enough, for this is the sort of elementary human reason that men never lost until they lost their gardens. Just as that higher reason that is more than human was lost with a garden long ago.